This is the Outpost RBA podcast, where we lead security teams to higher ground and new perspectives needed to secure the frontiers of enterprise, with hosts Will Robus and Stuart McIntosh.
Welcome, everyone, to the Outpost Security RBA podcast. I am your host, Will Robus, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Stuart McIntosh.
Hi.
How's the weather there in Scotland, Stuart?
Probably warmer there than where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah. No, Stuart has a
as dreary as the picture is, it's actually worse here. Yeah.
Stuart has a Scottish castle background. You know what castle that is? We probably shouldn't say it because they might sue us for royalties or something.
Yeah. A nondescript brick building that looks old.
Actually, I'll use that to promo. So we started this podcast exactly 14 episodes ago.
Hence 15.
Hence 15, episode 15 today. And we pushed it out on all the podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple, several others. Podbean is, that's our hosting platform. Great to work with. So maybe they can be a sponsor someday. But we spun up a YouTube channel and started posting a lot of this content, not only shorts, but also kind of full. We're kind of catching up with full podcast episodes. So a little call out to the YouTube channel if you want to check that out. It should be linked on the bottom of our webpage. But so yeah, today
I'm still nervous with more video. I like audio. But I get it. People want choice. Yeah, I do too.
And it's a little easier to share, I think YouTube is, than some of the pod clips and stuff. So today we are going to maybe a continuation, maybe a deep dive of the conversation we started last week around competing priorities. But what really happened was we kind of spitballed what I would call a new mental model for looking at defensive security from an execution standpoint. And we'll kind of do a quick summary of that before we jump in. But today we want to talk about more of a tactical approach to execution in cybersecurity, using one of our favorite trusted frameworks from a book by the Heath brothers called Switch. So I'm really excited to dive into this because it was kind of fun to look back and see how we've developed our practices, hopefully around some first principles and best practices from a general change standpoint.
If people wonder, okay, what's the basis of some of the stuff? Like, they see the result when they work with us, but they may not know, well, where did we kind of look to for some of these ideas or approaches? This is a great kind of insight into one of the base ones for sure.
Yeah, and it's a framework or strategy that we've implemented across. I mean, I've used it across multiple businesses, but the takeaway is also this is kind of a general framework that you can apply to any project of ambition, I would say, when people are involved.
Yeah. And I've seen it. I've actually done it. So individually, personal life, like how do I use it to change what I do? But I've also done it in teams. And it's kind of one of those approaches that you can change. Do you run your whole team like this? Do you approach questions this way? Or at least individually, if you're an individual contributor, you still can use quite a bit of what we're talking about. It's for getting things done, ultimately.
That's exactly what it is. It's how to get things done and get hard things done. That's the really cool part. So we got a lot talked about. I will do one quick kind of housekeeping announcement. As we always like to give a call out to the RBA community. That website is rba.community. We're recording this Thanksgiving week, actually, in 2023. And just the other day, Chris Perkins from Splunk posted all the office hour events for next year. So check out RBA.community, check out the office hours. There's a sign up link to essentially our monthly kind of meetup session where we like to have kind of defensive or RBA practitioners present either some apps or maybe some best practices or kind of success stories they've had, as well as have open forum for questions, discussion. So it's really our meetup launching off point for the community and to keep everyone engaged, as well as the sort of virtual presence, which is the Slack channel that we host. And there's sign up links on the RBA community site as well as our website.
The other nice thing is that even though it's for the year 2024, what's nice is Chris has put in a lot of work so that it's a single sign up and you check the boxes next to the events for the year that you at least want to get scheduled for. So what's nice is you don't have to fill out 12 of these. It's one, you pick the times, and a lot of people just select all of them and then see if conflicts come up, because I don't know what's on my calendar next week, let alone in 6 months. So
yeah. So it's a good,
he at least wants to get it on people's calendars.
and it's a good drip reminder, because you'll see pop-up events and workshops and breakouts and hopefully some in-person events at different conferences and things like that. So yeah, nice getting ahead of the curve for 2024. Yeah. So
Switch.
Yeah. So switch. I can't remember if we're supposed to pause in the middle of this or not, but whatever. This is getting edited out. All right, so let's jump into the meat of the topic today. Again, last episode, our intention was to talk about competing priorities in cybersecurity orgs, and try to provide some method of sorting that out, triaging that, even communicating it. But as I mentioned in the intro, we kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, exploring and explaining what we've seen from working with different companies. And again, big fan of mental models, which is essentially just a way to describe a complex reality, or how things really work in the real world. And it's starts with maybe a theory and a hypothesis, but then you kind of test it with real world situations and data, and then bring that information back to kind of tune, again, what we call a mental model. So as a quick recap, to hopefully set some context here, we started with, all right, how do we define our universe of information? And we said it's data, it's security data, it's environment data, log events, etc. We put them into kind of 5 main categories or buckets. Endpoint is one, network, firewall, web is the second, email being the third, authentication the fourth, and then kind of a catch-all security tooling data, I would say, malware, IDS, threat intel, kind of the prime examples. So with that, we dug into, all right, what do we use this data for? What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish? And we define that as 3 things. Number 1, find the bad. Number 2, stop the bad. Number 3, prevent the future bad. So
I think I don't know if you can distill it more than that.
That's good. That's the ultimate compliment. Simple as you can make it without making it too simple. So from there, we ask the question, all right, well then how do we use this mental model or this descriptive framework to decide what's the most important thing to do next, right? What should our priority be? How do we evaluate that? And that we kind of on the fly last week came up with this 3x3 rubric where we put the find, stop, prevent goals across kind of the three pillars that we're all familiar with from technology, process, and people. And as we riffed on that and looked back at our experience, what distilled from it was essentially an overarching hypothesis from how do you execute, how do you prioritize what we do next from a cybersecurity, security operations, implementation team. And that hypothesis was, right now, all companies will get the greatest and fastest ROI from a security standpoint, from a maturity standpoint, even from a financial standpoint. They will get the greatest and fastest ROI from investing in process versus any of the other options. How does that sound and feel that we've made it so explicit?
I think it's a rebalancing of the scales. I think the reason we've arrived at this is because it's probably one of the more neglected aspects of the work. I think we always thought, I need to hire people and buy technology to solve the problem of security. Well, what's the problem of security? That's what we broke into the find, stop, prevent. Okay, that's the problem of security. And now that we have that outlined, it's easier to judge, well, even if I buy the technology and hire the people, I'm still not seeing returns. Well, that's because you're missing this process piece, which is essentially gluing everything together. The people, you could have amazing talent, but if they don't know how to use the technology or aren't using it together, it doesn't really matter how much you've spent on either side of the coin. So I think what's happening is it's kind of this maturity to say, how do I unlock value from what I've already done? And by far the easiest way is process. Because how many times have we walked into companies where there's stuff sitting on the shelf that's super powerful, but they just didn't know how to take advantage of it? So I think a lot of that comes back to, it's long overdue that we put an emphasis on process. That's all.
Yeah. So, it's not easy by any means, which is exactly what we're going to talk about today. How do we
you said greatest and fastest, not easiest.
Yeah. But I think, what you said after that was it's by far the most neglected, because it's complicated, because it's ripe for failure. And it's complicated from hey, there's a lot of things here, but it's complex from even just the people standpoint, right? Because this find, stop, prevent incorporates at least 3 or 4 different disciplines, whether it's a small team of 2 or 3 people or a huge team of like 25 to 30, right?
And this isn't one of those where the bigger the team, the lower the barrier. If anything, the bigger the team, the higher the barrier here, because you probably need more processes or more comprehensive or more teams to weigh in on it.
Yeah.
So this is one of those where smaller teams have an advantage that they can take advantage of. That's on the table for them.
The larger the team, the larger the org, the more inertia there is. It's pure physics.
And I think what you're going to see as we kind of lay out today's kind of conversation, don't think this is how I need to approach I don't need to start with the entire security organization. Start in an area. Use this process to pick apart or use this approach to pick apart a single process in your organization and just try it with that. learn from it, adapt it, and then try something else, and just keep adding to kind of the way you have this view. Don't feel like tomorrow we have to switch everything over. That's not,
Yeah,
it's not realistic, and it's not reasonable. This is absolutely something you grow into as you get used to it.
correct. And I've been in a lot of organizations and situations and teams where, it's chaos, right? And things are all over the place. And, I think we see that in cybersecurity a lot, mostly from there's just so much going on, and there's, that we're just used to being reactive because that's how we survive, right? So if someone's listening to this and says, well, we don't have any process, like we're starting from scratch, that's actually not true, because however you're doing things now, whether it's completely disjointed or haphazard, that's still a process. It's still your reality. And creating a new process or changing your process, even if it's in completely rudimentary, at the end of the day, it's an exercise in change. We're doing this one way now. We need to do this a different way. We might not know exactly what that is or how to get there, but we know we need to get there. And that's where this framework, the switch framework, comes into play. And that's, again, from a book that was written by Dan and Chip Heath. I think it was published around 2010. But when I just looked it up, I was kind of surprised. I thought it's been around for longer than that. But I remember reading it somewhere in the first year or two it came out, and it was very, very impactful from not only like a motivating standpoint. So the book has a lot of examples of kind of these stories of successful change, exemplifying kind of the different parts of the framework. So it's a little inspirational in that fact, but then they've essentially distilled it down to a 1-page cheat sheet, if you will, about how to apply kind of some of the principles and apply it as a system.
And one thing to highlight, we'll, especially the last episode and this one, we'll put a lot of this in the show notes as well. So that, because this could be a lot of things that maybe you're trying to keep up with taking notes or something. We'll put in the show notes a bunch of these resources and talking points and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good call out. So with that, let's kind of jump in. So I have kind of so the Heath brothers on their website have a link to the my favorite kind of 1-page cheat sheet template. And what, like Stuart said, we'll definitely link that in the show notes, but I want to kind of just read the intro here. So how to make a switch. For things to change, somebody somewhere has to start acting differently. Maybe it's you, maybe it's your team. Whoever it is, picture that person or people. Each of us has an emotional elephant side and a rational rider side. You've got to reach both, and you've also got to clear the way for them to succeed. And that's really the intro, the beginning of the switch framework, which we'll dive into in the next 30, 40 minutes or so. But I definitely want to highlight this kind of overarching metaphor of this elephant and rider. And I think it's a powerful, it's a powerful picture of when you think about when you've tried to change something in your life or in your habits, or you have things on your to-do list that you really don't want to do and kind of avoid, that competing forces or that competing motivation. For me, the elephant and rider metaphor, I really felt that. And I think they do a pretty good job in the book of painting that picture and telling that story. But whenever I think of elephant and rider, I think of like myself as this like skinny, scrawny driver on top of this huge elephant. And if I want it to go left or right, I pull as hard as I can to the right to get him to go where I want, but he's not budging. He's just plowing straight ahead. And in fact, the harder I pull, the faster he runs in the wrong direction, the elephant. So, I mean, I've always loved this metaphor, and it almost adopting it in how I kind of think about how I feel about certain things. I want to make sure I call that out and give people a chance to really try to absorb that as an idea.
Okay.
What did that metaphor resonate with you at all, or is it just kind of like, oh, okay, it's a cute picture?
I don't know. I think I get it. I think the most important thing is that there's two sides that have to be in congruence to get something done. Both halves can get something done, but in order to get the big things done, they both have to be on the same page, and they both have to be moving in the same direction. And I think, as much as that's a metaphor, how many places have we seen where they're actually corroding their own advantage because of competing efforts? That could be you're splitting someone's time across two things that are competing, or it could be two projects that are actually corroding each other's advantage. They're actually fighting each other rather than in alignment. And so I've seen countless examples of, if we're not all moving in the same direction, we're never going to get something of greatness produced. We just aren't. You'll get work done for sure. You'll move the needle, but it'll never be to where you wanted it. It never will be.
Yeah. And even back to kind of the physics piece, from, whether it's a one person versus an organization, the elephant is also inertia. And it's an inertia can be, and a lot of times in an organization, inertia is like, hey, this is how we've always done it, right? Like, it's just what we're used to, regardless of how ridiculous or dysfunctional or outdated it is. So, you can have the best rider / driver with all the best intentions and knows exactly what needs to be done. But if they can't affect that inertia, then, you're just pulling and tugging and essentially wasting your energy. So you have to be smart about it, not just come in and do things with force. So, and I think that's what this framework is all about. It's how to be strategic, how do you execute, and it's almost kind of a hacking framework for changing things for.
I think so. For anyone that's kind of in the business side or entrepreneurship startup side, I'm sure this book kind of resonates with some of the other topics that have been covered in kind of that side of the house. This very much falls in line with some of the Gladwell stuff, and like it's all kind of in the same vein of taking psychology, blending it with kind of some sociology, and mixing it with business outcomes. That's kind of the recipe of these types of books. But for the people that come from the trenches, if you're kind of into the technology, into the security landscape, whether it's on offense or defense, doesn't matter. I think an interesting way to view this is these are the movable dials that you can play with to change how the outcome looks. And so when I look at this, to me, it is kind of more of a hack than it is a mental model, or like sometimes that doesn't get absorbed in my brain. It's very, can I hack this? Yes or no? And how can I hack it? How can I take advantage of the pre-built wiring in a way that I want, not necessarily in another way? And so to me, when I look through a lot of this content, I just have kind of that hacking mindset of, oh, okay, if I can connect this to what I do on this project, how can I take advantage of it? How can I leverage this piece of information? And so that's absolutely been the way I've been able to fold it in. So what are so we have two opposing sides, right? A rational entity and an emotional entity, or logic versus emotion. Not saying either of them are wrong, just saying they have their own ways of navigating and ways of determining a North Star. And we're saying the most important thing is to get them aligned and get them moving in a predetermined direction.
Well,
so how do we address the two sides?
Yeah. So, and getting it moving is part of it, but also getting them to some destination is really the end goal. And it's choosing that destination is part of that art, I think. But anyway, so the framework has three main components. And again, following this rider elephant metaphor, the first element is direct the rider. Second element is motivate the elephant. And then the third one is shape the path.
One more time.
So first thing you need to do is direct the rider. Second thing is motivate the elephant. And the third one is shape the path. So
the reason I asked for you to repeat it is because you'll notice that the action on the front of the statement is specific to that element. So it doesn't say direct the elephant. Well, it's emotion. You can't, like, you'll never, like, be happy right now. Just be happy. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to motivate it. You have to get it to buy in. But the directing the rider wants to do something, but doesn't know where or how. So hence directing. So I just wanted you to repeat it because I think those words help kind of like foreshadow what these elements might be for that section.
Yeah. And as I was kind of going through these and making notes from the cybersecurity perspective and the perspective of like what we've been doing, they kind of quickly overlap, which is exciting to me because you're getting almost like not efficiencies of scale, but you're kind of getting 2 for 1s, right? Like if you have these elements stitched together in an executable motion, then your time to success and your chances of success, your time to success is reduced and your chance of success is greatly increased. And that's a whole nother thing. So
I love BOGO deals. I love buy one, get ones. Big fan.
Right. So that, and like when you read the book, they've got very specific examples for each one of these elements. And, you know, so it's kind of like cherry picking to exemplify one piece or another piece. But when we talk about it from a cybersecurity perspective, it's actually kind of stitched together into one story because it's the reality that we've seen and known. So, all right. So the first piece is direct the rider. And under that, we've got three key subtasks or elements focused on directing the rider. So the first one is follow the bright spots. And in general terms, this was basically like, hey, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like find something or an element that's either working that you've seen work, that you know works, or that you've seen other people get to work in similar situations or even analogs. I mean, completely unrelated, but.
So we did that episode about big wins or quick wins, bright spots. Look for things like that. So it'll be like, and that bright spot might be generic to a space, like, oh, prevent PowerShell from calling the internet. Like, sure. Or it might be within your own company, you've seen a successful project or a successful manager of a group. Like bright spots can just be bright from the standpoint of, does it help with what I want to do?
Yeah. And for us specifically, I mean, RBA is one of those bright spots, if not a key bright spot. And even in the first episode, we talked about, okay, why is RBA revolutionary? And it's because of how it approaches things from a fundamental perspective, but also like a perspective that up until RBA wasn't terribly common or even executable. So, and I think what's been exciting in working these last 4+ years is, we started out educating people on risk-based alerting and how it operates, what its potential, the wins that we've seen with it from a program standpoint. And I think that message has been really, really well received. And there's a lot of teams and companies that believe in it as the future. And that's where a lot of people are, I feel like, which is a good thing. They're like, hey, this is a bright spot. This is potential. We're interested in it. We want to pursue it. And we talk to a lot of companies that are there. But that's the other part of it. That's just the first step, right?
So follow bright spots or find bright spots.
Yep. Find the bright spots. The second piece is scripting the critical moves. And this is tricky. If you haven't
part implementation, part like delivery.
Well, script is a loaded word, right? In our world, because script is an executable.
It implies effort.
Yeah. Well, coding. So, this is what, when I said these things kind of overlap. So scripting the critical moves for the rider is also a part, I think, of shaping the path, which is the third piece. But a lot of what we've tried to do is start where you are, right? Don't create a big backlog of, hey, we got to make all these things right or close to perfect or fixed before we try to go down this new path of RBA or even any initiative. So how do we simplify and focus on what's here and what will get us closer to where we want to go, I guess.
I used to work with a coworker that if you gave them a project to lead and you said, okay, go implement multi-factor authentication, that was the ask. Some people take that and they go do the research, find the bright spots. Okay, what kind of successful MFA stuff has been done? Okay, so these are the types of technologies, the types of configurations, and whatever. He would freeze if it was as open-ended as that. He struggled to say what's next. And so to me, when I hear script critical moves, what I hear is what I used to have to work with him on, which is exactly what I said. Go find bright spots. What are their lessons learned? What technology, like it's almost like what's needed, what's the order, and what kind of outcome can we expect? It's almost like, you get what I mean? It's almost like you have to at least say what the main steps of the process you want are. If you only say, go forth and do this, some people, and here I think this is sometimes where the rational side will seize because it doesn't see an order or it doesn't see elements. It's almost like you have to break it into the elements that matter.
Yeah. And I can think of a few examples that we've and how we apply this in what we do. So, the first one is we do these ES reviews, and essentially we've got the critical path or the critical steps of successfully implementing RBA in an environment. And it takes all of these different pieces to be in good shape, right? So all the key elements of ES, and most people have them in some various state. And usually one or two of the pieces is fairly advanced. where the other two maybe need some work, right? So again,
Mm-hmm.
where are we right now? And then we try to look at, okay, what's the delta in sort of the critical moves that we need from a foundational standpoint that opens up this potential new reality.
So what's the third element here? So follow bright spots, script critical moves. What's the third one here?
Point to the destination.
So that delta equation that you're talking about, that's literally connecting other people's bright spots to my goal to figure out the critical moves, right? That's essentially, it's almost like number 2 connects number 1 and number 3. It's almost like all 3 together, you end up with, I know how to mimic success. These are the steps for me to get to that success. And the third one is, this is what I set as my North Star for success, what I wanted.
Well, and this is, all right, so we're in the rider context, remember, and this is kind of the sort of scoping and planning piece, I would say. And if I'm, we're talking about this kind of in third person, but like, I look at this when I think about the framework in first person, right? So like, I'm the rider and all the other people that I'm working with are also riders, right? I want to stack the deck for me as much as I can. So when I'm looking at, all right, what are the bright spots? This is great. Gives me some inspiration, gives me some context and structure. What are the critical moves to get there? But if I'm looking at those critical moves, I want to be sure we can actually get them done, right? And then the last piece is this destination. I want to make sure this destination we can get to without quitting or getting distracted or giving up or anything like that. So when I look at these 3 things together as the rider trying to create or implement something, I want to make sure that this is going to work. So I'm going to maybe move that destination or tweak the destination or hack some critical moves to make sure that this thing comes together. And that's just in the rational part, right?
So how about the other side? Because that all makes sense, as it should, right? We're talking about rational. This should feel very much kind of like a project. Like what type of project? What are the main milestones, and what does done look like? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that feels familiar. What's on the other side of that coin then? The elephant.
Well, correct. So the elephant, motivating the elephant being the second piece, has 3 sub elements as well, or 3 kind of subtext. And that is, and this is the metaphor for the emotional / inertia side, right? So number 1 is find the feeling. Number 2 is shrink the change. And number 3 is grow your people.
So this to me, so if the first part, the rider elements, felt like every project I've ever done in a corporation, in a company, right? It really does feel that way. I don't remember being in any team meetings where we said, hey, let's sit down and find the feeling. Hey, let's shrink the feeling of change. And here, you may hear grow your people. It tends to be associated with engagement studies or like employee retention. But this is different. When we say grow your people here, it's not continue to stack up certifications, continue to take online training. This feels a little different since we're in this feeling, shrinking change, that world. So to me, these feel a little bit more foreign in a corporate culture. But I think that this might be some of that value then, because if we can address these, okay, now we can get some alignment here.
Well, think about it from an execution standpoint. Now, so what what we've built as a company is our switch framework delivery of RBA inside of a customer. Okay. So we've packaged that into essentially a package, right? That includes that's essentially our 0 to 1 app. Okay. So we scripted the critical moves and we've defined the end as let's get risk-based alerting alerts in front of you. Let's get your data organized and your detections running to create this new alerting and response reality, right? It's a template. And you can't do it all at once. We've seen that that's a lot more work, and your probability of success is you're kind of stacking the deck against yourself, right? You can't fire hose people. It never works. But when you show people the destination at the kind of end of that rider piece and they see it come alive, it elicits a feeling, right? So like, it's like you can tell the elephant, hey, there's lunch, there's a lot of food, and it's 10 yards ahead. You just got to get there. Or you can have that smell of that lunch waft toward the elephant, and then you don't have to tell him anything. He's just gonna walk toward lunch because he can smell it. So it's I mean, the feeling part is kind of the ultimate part of the hack, really.
And I think so. Here's what's different is the way in your example, it was already built and put in order to draw them in. Lunch was already served. But if you have a long path, that smell's not going to get there. So how do you find the feeling if you can't take advantage of the smell or the sight, or your goal is not close enough? Because I feel like some of the places we walk into, they believe their endpoint is years away from today. It's years. And so that find the feeling, they almost don't want to go there because to them, it sets them up for disappointment. They believe head down, 1 foot in front of the other, will get there eventually. And what we're saying is, no, you have to look up because your goal might be closer than you're thinking, or you might get there faster. So to me, the way I think we've been able to find the feeling is in these conversations with them, feeling like helping them kind of viscerally get that experience, either through a demo or through discussions or talking through situations and scenarios. And it's almost like finding the feeling is having the dialogue to help them feel like it's comfortable enough to have that feeling. Like it's okay to be optimistic. It's okay to be hopeful. Like it's okay. I know that we've been kind of disappointed or let down before, but I think as part of eliciting a change, people have to feel like it's okay for them to feel going into the change. So
yeah, and that you kind of touched on the other part of the metaphor that I didn't cover yet, and that is, so you have a big, strong elephant, and you have a relatively much smaller and weaker rider. Okay, so the strength of the rider is much less relative to the strength of the elephant. So in an arm wrestling competition, the elephant's going to win every time, right? In a sheer force of strength and endurance. So when we talk about motivating the elephant and shrinking the change as a strategy for that, that immediately folds back into scripting the critical moves. Because if you come up with a list of critical moves that is 50 things long and it's going to take months and months and months,
that's not shrinking the change.
Well, but you're not going to find the feeling. You're not going to get to that point of intrinsic motivation, if you will, for the elephant or the people. If your critical path is too complicated, right? Like, so you have to pick a destination that's meaningful, but also achievable, and then create a execution path that allows you to get there again with higher probability. So yeah,
and I think the shrinking the change is really curious to me, because if someone's willing to be vulnerable and really emotionally get to that endpoint, like, yes, we can be successful, we can deal with all of these alerts we're getting or all the phishing attacks or what, like if they emotionally buy in, what's amazing is if you're able to shrink what they believe the change is. So you can take something that they think is going to be 2,000 hours of work and countless weekends, and you bring it in to 200 hours and it's business hours. It's almost like you're rewarding their emotional buy-in immediately, because they're like, oh, okay, I bid on this when I thought a lot more sacrifice was going. Like, that's almost what shrinking the change is how much sacrifice is this going to cost me? What am I going to have to give up to feel this feeling I have right now forever? And it's like, when we shrink that change, we shrink what they believe the sacrifice is. I'll never forget. There's so many people I've heard that are like, I just don't have time, or I'm so busy, or like I would ask some of my team members, hey, where's this project at? And they're like, I'm just so busy. And so I said, okay, if you're so busy, we're going to track your time to 15-minute increments for 1 week. It's a lot of extra work, but we're going to do it for a week. We're going to find out what's consuming your time. Turns out they thought it was going to be so much effort and hassle that they were putting it off and doing other stuff. Like they actually came back to me and didn't even tell me how their time was spent, because they realized how much browsing on their phone they were doing. They answered their own question, which is, I do have the time for this. It's just I made it to be such a big thing in my head that I could never get the momentum going. I could never turn over that engine and get moving. So I think that's why shrinking the change is so important, because it allows you to kind of emotionally get it going.
Yeah. I mean, and as we talk through this, so I mean, we've got a couple other parts of this framework, but this is really the win or lose piece, right? So assuming, again, let's bring it back to risk-based alerting. So the bright spot is RBA, and we've seen it be super successful in every kind of company, right, across the board. And where teams struggle with is the how, right? How do we get there? And they should, because they haven't done it before, right? That makes perfect sense. So it's this scripting the critical moves in relation to an achievable destination, and then getting to that destination with a level of impact and feeling. And we've seen this. We've seen it when teams see RBA really work for the first time. Like, it's an aha moment, literal aha moment. And Jimmy talked about it in our interview with him. He's like, everybody just like got addicted.
Well, and now as we talk about these elements, go back and listen to Haley, go back and listen to Jimmy about their first encounters with RBA and compare it to these elements. And the other thing that I find funny is I kind of look at these three. So number one for motivate the elephant is find the feeling. number one, for direct the writer, find the bright spots. This is almost like how to get both sides to buy in. The initial, I'm going to listen. I'm going to attend that meeting and pay attention. That's almost what the first bullet in both are. The second bullet for the elephant, shrink the change. For the writer, script the critical moves. You know what that sounds like? How to get them to show up the second day and the third day, because that's what moves them per day. I know what's asked of me is what the writer's looking for. I think this is doable is what that emotional elephant side is. And then this third one for direct the writer is point to the destination. That helps me stay in for the long haul. That's where that infinite mindset kicks in, which is I'm going to keep doing this because I know what's in store for me at the end, because it's logical. Well, that's what keeps them going. That's the sustaining. On the elephant side, it's grow your people, which we'll go into, but that's the sustaining mechanism for the elephant.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the same kind of layout, but it's approaching it from essentially a different perspective that satiates what that part needs.
Yeah. And it's from a scoping perspective, it's almost like partially it's a proof of concept, right? It's an experiment of the first cycle to get that buy-in, but also vet some of the critical pieces of the process, right? Because again, this is all driven by process, enabled by people and technology. But like what we're trying to implement here, what we are implementing here is rooted in process and execution, right? Bringing all those things together. And this is where you learn your points of failure as well, right? So if you can kind of proof of concept the alpha version of this process, bringing in all these different people and things, then you have a foundation to build on, right? And that's where we get into kind of the rest of the framework. And the third one on the elephant side is what you mentioned, Stuart. So it's grow your people. And I describe this as this is the formalization and scaling of the feeling and the process that delivers this new positive reality. And you have to, this is embedding it into your normal operations and execution, reducing that sort of friction and making the change more habits, right? So, well, habits.
So I remember a conversation that you had with one of the team managers of one of our customers, and they said for the first couple of weeks they had no idea what we were even doing. I don't even know what RBA is. And then he said to you, and then I saw it and I got it. We've affectionately called it that light bulb moment. And you can actually tell when a person gets it. You heard Jimmy, you heard Haley, you'll hear other people in the community. It's as sudden as a light switch, where it's like, I was confused before and now it all makes sense. That to me is this element, grow your people, happening from one person to another. And this is what happens in these security teams, is that there may be a champion in the beginning, but by the end, most of the team should feel that same feeling. It should be replicated across. Sometimes it's through the training that we do as a part of the project. Sometimes it's in individual moments of interaction. Some people in their head can get there academically, and some need to feel it. It's all different. But the point is that feeling everyone should have with whatever you're implementing, because that's what sustains it. That's the difference between when the project stops, the value stops, or when the project stops, the real value kicks in, because it's become muscle memory. It's become second nature to to the way the team works. So does your value stop when your tasks do, or does it sustain? I think this is the element, grow your people. This is the element that really good programs have figured out.
Well, and there's an ROI on momentum there too, right? So like, again, this feeling motivation intrinsically, when you can, and we do this, in a couple of weeks, we get this RBA reality and get this aha moment in front of everybody on the team. And then immediately after, all right, let's enable you through these very specific trainings so that you can build confidence, have trust in it, have trust in your abilities and understanding of it. So you can start to really, to mold it and, manipulate it in a positive way. Right. So turn the tool set into your tool set. That, again, and that's where this kind of scaling and formalization comes in. It is, how do we take this momentum from, hey, we got a win here and we feel like this could be a really positive future. All right, now let's put some gas on that fire and let everybody get in the kitchen and start cooking.
How many times have we done an RBA engagement or a 0 to 1 engagement? And at the end, when we talk to leadership, there's 3 or 4 new initiatives that either they brought forward to do sooner, or they now think that they're capable of doing that prior they were not. It's almost like this, it's almost like it becomes infectious, this enthusiasm of being able to execute. And that's the real hallmark here. And I think it happens in the people part of this. The people part is where you feel that enthusiasm, is where you feel that motivation to do the next thing.
It becomes infectious, the ability to execute. I think that is an excellent phrase, and that is where we're going to wrap up this episode of the Outpost Security RBA podcast. The discussion continues into the third element of the switch framework, and the metaphor of direct the rider, motivate the elephant, and shape the path. And next episode, we will conclude with the shaping the path piece of the framework, and again, apply it to creating positive and effective change inside the complexity that is cybersecurity inside of all of your organizations. As always, we appreciate you listening. Please check out outpost-security.com. There you can sign up for our Slack group and connect with us pretty much 24/7, or connect with someone 24/7 from around the world, as well as check out RBA.community on the web for the RBA community events. Once again, this is Will Robus, your host, and I'm signing off for Stuart McIntosh as I recorded this outro after the fact, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Outpost RBA podcast. Stuart McIntosh has over 20 years of experience building and maturing security programs inside Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, he gave a talk at Splunks.conf titled "Say Goodbye to Your Big Alert Pipeline and Say Hello to Your New Risk-Based Approach," which started the rise of RBA. As the creator and architect of risk-based alerting, he pioneers security methodologies at Outpost Security, which he co-founded with Will. Will Robus has spent the last 20 years in the operations or financial C-suites at technology and security companies, focused on what drives results and successful scaling. At Outpost Security, he works with CISOs to imagine a more expansive future for their SOC, once it has a solid RBA foundation. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it with your security team and CISO. Connect with us on LinkedIn and contact us at outpost-security.com to lift your team out of the fog of alert confusion with RBA 0 to 1.